The air was thick with tension as Buddy, the scruffy stray, stood motionless in front of Mrs. Thompson's corner shop, his brown and black fur matted with the wear of street life. But his eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, spoke of something far greater than his circumstances. Tonight, however, there was something different about him. In his mouth, he carried a small, worn doll. Its pink dress was stained with dirt, its button eyes staring blankly. Its one remaining button eye seemed to pierce through the quiet night, begging for answers. Mrs. Thompson's heart caught in her throat as she peered out the shop window. She had seen this dog often, a quiet presence on the edge of her small community, but never had he brought her something like this. She slowly opened the door, hesitant, curious, but terrified at the same time. "What have you got there, boy?" she whispered. The dog didn't bound in like strays usually did. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, the doll clutched delicately in his mouth, his gaze locked with hers. As she reached out to take the doll, Buddy pulled it back slightly, as if trying to tell her, "There's more to this." His eyes never wavered. And then she saw it, a shadow, barely visible in the alleyway, watching them. Whoever it was didn't want to be seen, but they were there, watching Buddy, watching her, watching the doll. Mrs. Thompson's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. As the street lamp flickered twice, plunging the alley into darkness, the dog growled. A low, menacing sound that made her blood run cold. And when the light returned, she saw him, a figure in a dark hoodie, something metallic gleaming in his hand. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Buddy placed the doll at Mrs. Thompson's feet and stood between her and the shadowy figure. His body was tense, protective, as if warning the stranger to stay away. The doll seemed to plead with its remaining button eye, staring up at her in desperation. Mrs. Thompson's breath caught as she realized this wasn't just a stray dog. This was a warning, a sign of something much darker, more urgent than anything she had ever imagined. As she reached for the doll, a small paper fell from its torn seam. She unfolded it, her fingers trembling. On it, written in childish handwriting, was one word: help. Welcome to Heart Force, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. The morning sun crept through the dusty windows of Mrs. Thompson's corner shop, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the world seemed to pause, but Mrs. Thompson couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her chest. Buddy's presence had never been just about food scraps or a fleeting encounter. There was something more, something urgent in his every action, and she couldn't ignore it. As she wiped down the counter, her mind drifted back to the night before. The doll, the strange figure in the alley, and Buddy's unrelenting protectiveness. It had all felt like a warning. But a warning for what? And why had the dog brought that doll to her? She couldn't stop thinking about the word written on the paper. Help. She knew deep down that it wasn't just a coincidence. It was as if Buddy had brought her the doll for a reason. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the shop door opening. She looked up to see Sarah Walker, a woman who had become a regular in the shop. Mrs. Thompson had known Sarah for years, but lately, the woman seemed different, more worn out, the weight of something heavy hanging over her. Sarah's daughter, Kayla, had been in and out of the shop often. Mrs. Thompson could recall countless moments when she'd watched Kayla, the young girl with the quiet strength, clinging to her mother with all the tenderness of a child too familiar with the harshness of life. "Morning, Sarah," Mrs. Thompson greeted her, her voice carrying a note of concern. Sarah forced a smile as she stepped inside, but there was a weariness in her eyes that Mrs. Thompson couldn't ignore. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," she said, running a hand through her silver hair. "I'm just here to pick up a few things for Kayla. She's not feeling well today." Mrs. Thompson nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Sarah hadn't shared much lately, but she could tell something was off. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said softly. "I hope she feels better soon." Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking again, her voice quiet. "Actually, I've been meaning to ask you, have you seen Kayla's doll lately? It's strange, but she's been asking for it all morning. I thought it might have just gotten misplaced, but Mrs. Thompson's heart skipped a beat. She reached into the back of the counter drawer and pulled out the doll. It was still there, just as Buddy had left it, its pink dress now soiled with dirt, its button eyes staring at her. She didn't need to say anything. Sarah's eyes told her everything. "That's Hope," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out to take the doll. "It's her favorite. She never goes anywhere without it." Mrs. Thompson watched Sarah, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was about to say. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. Something strange happened last night. That dog, the stray Buddy, he brought me this doll." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Buddy?" Mrs. Thompson nodded. "Yes, he brought it to me last night, and there was a paper inside with one word on it. Help." A long silence fell over the shop. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped Hope in her arms, and Mrs. Thompson could see the wheels turning in her mind. "What do you think it means?" Sarah finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Mrs. Thompson admitted, "but I think something's happened. Something that we need to understand before it's too late." They both stared at the doll, the worn fabric and the missing button eye, a symbol of the quiet, unspoken struggles that Kayla had faced. The doll had been her constant companion, and now it was at the center of a mystery neither of them could explain. As Sarah clutched the doll to her chest, Buddy appeared at the door, his eyes sharp and alert. Mrs. Thompson noticed how the dog's gaze flickered between Sarah and the doll, as though making sure the pieces were in place. It was as if Buddy knew something they didn't, something he was desperate to communicate. Mrs. Thompson swallowed hard. "Sarah, I think we need to go look for Kayla." "Now." Sarah nodded, her face pale. I'm scared, Mrs. Thompson. What if something's happened to her?" "We'll find her," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice firm. "Buddy's here, and he's already started leading us in the right direction." The two women gathered what they could. Sarah grabbed a coat, and Mrs. Thompson grabbed a flashlight, and they rushed out of the shop, Buddy already leading them down the street. The doll still clutched in his mouth. It was as though he had already mapped out the path they needed to take. They turned a corner and headed toward the park where Kayla had last been seen. The day was gray and heavy with the promise of rain. It was eerily quiet, save for the sound of Buddy's paws padding along the pavement, his every step filled with purpose. The women followed, their hearts pounding, each of them wondering if this was the beginning of something they hadn't prepared for. And then, without warning, Buddy stopped. His nose sniffed the air, his ears perked, and his body tensed. "What is it, boy?" Mrs. Thompson whispered, her voice trembling. Buddy's eyes never left the alley ahead. He was focused, his movements measured, as if he was waiting for something or someone. Mrs. Thompson felt the chill of fear creep over her. "I don't like this. There's something wrong." As they stood frozen, the air heavy with anticipation, they heard it, faint at first but unmistakable. A scream, a child's scream. It was Kayla. The scream echoed through the alley, sharp and raw, like the desperate cry of someone trapped. Mrs. Thompson's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, everything around her seemed to go still, as if the world had paused to listen. But then Buddy took off. He didn't hesitate. He dashed into the alley, the doll still in his mouth, his movements fueled by instinct and determination. "Kayla!" Sarah cried, but Buddy was already too far ahead. "Buddy, wait!" She started to run after him, but Mrs. Thompson grabbed her arm. "We can't run blindly," she said, her voice tight with fear but steady. "We need to be smart." But Buddy was already a few blocks ahead, and the sounds of his paws hitting the wet pavement urged them forward. Sarah's face was pale, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she clutched the doll to her chest. Mrs. Thompson pulled Sarah close and whispered, "We will find her. We just need to follow Buddy. He knows the way." With Buddy leading them, they quickly moved deeper into the maze of alleys that ran behind the old industrial district. The area was unfamiliar to both women, filled with abandoned buildings and overgrown lots that had long since fallen into disrepair. The faint sound of rain began to pick up, but it didn't stop Buddy. He moved with purpose, his steps growing more urgent. "He's never been this determined before," Mrs. Thompson murmured, her eyes locked on Buddy's back. The dog was moving faster, as if the closer they got, the more desperate his mission became. "Something's wrong, Sarah. He's trying to tell us something." As they approached an old warehouse, the air grew thick with tension. The light from the street lamps flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should. The distant hum of machinery was all that could be heard. Buddy stopped in front of a rusted metal door, and he dropped the doll at his feet with a gentle but deliberate motion. His eyes remained fixed on the door as he stood in front of it, his body rigid. "This is it," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice barely a whisper. She stepped forward cautiously, but Sarah stopped her. "Wait, how do we know what's behind that door?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "What if it's a trap?" "We have to take the risk," Mrs. Thompson replied, her hand gripping Sarah's for strength. "We've come this far. We have to believe Buddy. He wouldn't bring us here if it wasn't important." Buddy growled lowly as Sarah took a hesitant step forward, his body language warning her to stay back. He was acting like a guardian, protective and watchful. Mrs. Thompson could feel her heart racing, but she knew there was no turning back now. "Let's call the police," Sarah suggested, her voice filled with panic. "We don't know what we're walking into." Mrs. Thompson nodded, but her eyes never left Buddy. "I'll call them, but we can't wait. If Kayla is in there, every second counts." She reached in her pocket for her phone, dialing 911 quickly. "Yes, I need help. We found something, someone. Please hurry," she said, her voice trembling. "A young girl is missing, and we need assistance immediately." Buddy's growl grew louder, his stance more rigid. Something was wrong, and the urgency in his eyes made it clear that they couldn't wait for backup. Mrs. Thompson gave Sarah one last look before she reached down to pick up the doll from the ground. She held it carefully in her hands, feeling its weight, and in that moment, something clicked inside her. She realized that this doll was more than just a toy. It was a connection, a lifeline. It was a reminder that there was still hope, even in the darkest times. She turned to Sarah, who was still hesitating. "Sarah, we have to move. This doll, it's the last piece we have. Buddy knows something. He brought us here for a reason." Sarah nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Okay, let's do it. Let's find Kayla." With Buddy leading them once more, they approached the old metal door. Mrs. Thompson pressed her ear to the door, listening for any sound from within. There was nothing, only the soft hum of machinery in the distance. She grabbed the handle and twisted it, pushing the door open slowly. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the silence, as if warning them of what lay ahead. Inside was darker than expected. The smell of damp wood and stale air filled the room, and for a moment, Mrs. Thompson felt her stomach lurch. The place was abandoned, its walls covered in graffiti and dirt, but something about it felt off. There was a tension in the air, like the building was holding its breath. Buddy walked in first, sniffing the air with an intensity that sent a chill down Mrs. Thompson's spine. He stopped and turned toward a small hallway at the back of the warehouse, his eyes glowing in the dim light. "That's where she is," Mrs. Thompson whispered. She felt her pulse quicken as she followed Buddy, with Sarah close behind. They rounded the corner and came face to face with a closed door. Buddy pawed at it, whining softly. Mrs. Thompson reached for the handle, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew they were close now, so close to finding Kayla, to unraveling the mystery that had consumed them both. But just as her hand touched the door, they heard it, soft, muffled breathing. And then a voice. "I'm here." Kayla's voice. The moment Kayla's voice pierced through the silence, Mrs. Thompson's heart leaped in her chest. She froze, listening intently, as if daring not to breathe too loudly. The girl's voice was weak, yet unmistakable, and the relief that flooded Mrs. Thompson's body was tempered by the realization of the danger that still lingered in the air. "Kayla," Sarah called out, her voice trembling with both relief and fear. "Sweetheart, we're here. We're coming for you." Buddy, with a low growl, stood at attention, his eyes trained on the door, his body rigid. He had sensed their approach long before they'd heard the voice, but his silent watch was now more urgent than ever. The protective stance he had adopted was like that of a soldier guarding the last remaining hope of a fallen world. Mrs. Thompson slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open. The dim light that filtered in from the outside revealed a small, cramped room. Kayla sat in the corner, her body frail, eyes wide with fear and confusion. She looked pale, but her breathing was steady, a testament to the diligence that her mother had poured into her care. Her small, trembling hands clutched tightly onto her beloved doll, Hope, whose single button I still stared back at Mrs. Thompson like a witness to the torment. Kayla. Sarah rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside her daughter, her voice breaking with emotion. She reached out to hold her, but Kayla flinched at first, as if she wasn't sure whether the arms around her would bring comfort or more pain. "It's okay, baby," Sarah whispered, gently cupping her daughter's face. "You're safe now. We're going to take you home." But as Sarah held Kayla in her arms, Mrs. Thompson couldn't help but notice something else, something that made her stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with the shock of finding Kayla alive. There was a strange calm in the room, an almost unnatural stillness that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The room itself felt like it was holding its breath. Buddy, however, wasn't finished. His eyes were fixed on something near the far wall, and with a low growl, he trotted over to the shadowed corner where the faintest of movements caught his attention. Mrs. Thompson turned, her heart pounding, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. The corner was empty, nothing but an old wooden crate and a few discarded items. But as she scanned the room, her eyes landed on something that made her blood run cold. Beneath the crate, almost hidden from view, was a small, worn medical bag, the kind that a respiratory therapist might carry. Mrs. Thompson's heart thudded in her chest as she realized the significance of the find. This was no ordinary kidnapper. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was something much more complex, far more personal. "Sarah," Mrs. Thompson called softly, her voice shaking. "I think we found something." Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with confusion, still trying to process the shock of having Kayla back in her arms. "What? What is it?" she asked, her voice fragile. Mrs. Thompson moved cautiously toward the crate, kneeling down to pull the medical bag into the light. This is his," she whispered. "The man who took her. He's a respiratory therapist. He's been watching you. He's been watching Kayla." Sarah's face paled as Mrs. Thompson opened the bag carefully, revealing bottles of medications, oxygen masks, and equipment meant for someone with severe respiratory issues. Sarah's hands shook violently as she reached for the medical items, each one a cruel reminder of the medical struggle she had faced with her daughter. The one thing she'd worked so hard to protect Kayla from, an expert manipulating a child's medical needs. "He knew everything," Mrs. Thompson murmured. "Every appointment, every treatment. He was trying to save her, like he saved his own daughter." But there was something else in the bag, a small notebook. Mrs. Thompson flipped it open carefully, her eyes scanning the pages filled with meticulous notes about Kayla's condition, her breathing patterns, even her medical history. It was clear this man had spent years studying her, gathering information as if he were her doctor. The worst part, however, was a series of handwritten entries at the back of the notebook. The handwriting was neat, precise, but the words were chilling. "I can fix what the system failed. She'll never suffer again. I'll give her what I couldn't give my own daughter." "I don't understand," Sarah gasped, her voice barely audible. Why would he do this? Why take her?" Mrs. Thompson's heart sank as she understood the full scope of the man's delusion. He hadn't seen himself as a villain. In his mind, he was rescuing Kayla from a broken system. A man who had lost his own daughter to illness. He believed that he could offer a better life, a better care. But at what cost? And why Kayla? The answer became clearer as they heard a faint sound coming from the hallway. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful. Buddy stiffened, his growl low and deep, a warning signal. Mrs. Thompson instinctively moved in front of Sarah and Kayla, shielding them with her body. She had no idea what she would do if the man returned, but there was no way she was letting him take another step. The footsteps grew louder, and soon a figure appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Thompson felt her breath catch in her throat as she recognized him. It was Michael Anderson, the man who had been so quiet, so elusive. The man whose obsession with fixing the broken system had led him to kidnap a child. "Stay back," Mrs. Thompson shouted, her voice steady but full of fury. "Stay away from her." Anderson froze, his eyes flickering with guilt, with fear. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He stood there for a moment, as if torn between what he had done and what he knew was right. Then, his eyes locked on Buddy, the former rescue dog whose loyalty was unwavering. "I didn't mean to," Anderson whispered, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to fix things. I wanted to save her, just like I couldn't save my own." His words felt like a slap, and Mrs. Thompson's heart broke for the grief he carried. Grief that had twisted his sense of right and wrong until it was unrecognizable. The delusion that had driven him to take Kayla, to isolate her, was too much to bear. But even now, standing in the doorway, he wasn't the villain he had seemed. He was a man who had lost everything and had tried to build his own world of twisted salvation. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with a mixture of grief, confusion, and the weight of shattered illusions. Michael Anderson stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes locked on Buddy, the dog who had once been a trained search and rescue hero. Now, the dog was the symbol of loyalty and truth, a living testament to the difference between what was right and what was twisted. "Please," Anderson whispered, his voice barely a breath. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to give her a chance. I thought if I could save her, if I could give her what I failed to give Grace, everything would be okay. But it's not, is it?" Mrs. Thompson's heart ached, torn between empathy for his sorrow and the deep outrage for the choices he had made. She had seen the same kind of pain in people who had suffered, but she also knew that pain could not be an excuse for causing harm. "Michael," she said softly, her voice firm yet compassionate, "you've hurt this family. You've taken a little girl from her mother. You've caused them fear, pain, and loss. What you did, none of that can be undone by excuses." He lowered his head, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his actions. The guilt that had been buried deep inside him now surfaced like a tidal wave, drowning him in the reality of what he had done. I thought I could fix things," Anderson choked out, his eyes clouded with unshed tears. "I thought if I could give her the care I couldn't give Grace, I would make up for all the mistakes I made. But I lost my way. I've lost everything. My career, my daughter, and now this." Buddy moved forward, slowly, cautiously, his eyes not leaving Anderson's. He stood by the man, as if willing him to understand the truth in his own heart, to realize that redemption came not through control, but through selflessness, through repentance, through making things right. Buddy knew what needed to happen, Mrs. Thompson said quietly, glancing at the dog. "He never stopped searching for Kayla. He never gave up on her, and he never gave up on you, either. It's not too late to change, Michael. It's never too late to do what's right." But as Anderson stared at Buddy, a strange peace began to settle over his broken features. It wasn't a peace of resignation, but a peace that came with the weight of truth. He had taken a child in the belief that he could offer her a better life, but in the end, it was the love of the community, the loyalty of a dog, and the strength of a mother that had shown him the true meaning of salvation. He sank to his knees, his hands shaking as he reached out for the photo of Grace that still lay on the table. With trembling fingers, he touched the image, his face crumpling with grief. "I didn't know how to live with the loss of her," he whispered. "I didn't know how to let go." Mrs. Thompson stood back, watching the scene unfold before her. This was the reckoning, not just for Michael Anderson, but for the entire community. The story of loss, pain, and healing wasn't just about a missing child. It was about how the brokenness of one person had impacted so many lives. How love, even when twisted by grief, could still lead to redemption. As the authorities arrived, Anderson was quietly handcuffed, but there was no celebration in the room. No cheers, no triumphant exclamations. There was only the quiet sound of Kayla's breathing, the soft rustle of the medical bag, and the sound of Buddy's low whine as he stayed by Kayla's side, his head gently resting against her. Kayla was safe. She was home, but the scars, the trauma, would linger for a long time. The road to healing would not be easy, and it would take time. But at least now, the journey would be one of hope and not of darkness. As they left the warehouse, the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden light over the town. Mrs. Thompson, Sarah, and Kayla stood together, each of them holding on to a piece of the past, a piece of the journey they had walked together. And though their hearts still carried the weight of what had happened, there was something lighter in the air now. A shift, a change. As they walked back toward Mrs. Thompson's shop, Buddy trotted beside them, his body tired but his spirit unbroken. He had done his job. He had found Kayla. He had brought her home. In the process, he had shown everyone what true loyalty and love looked like. "I never thought it would end like this," Sarah whispered as she glanced down at her daughter, who was holding Hope tightly in her arms. "I thought I was going to lose her forever." "We all did," Mrs. Thompson replied. "But we didn't, and that's what matters." Buddy's tail wagged slowly, as if in agreement. He had given everything he had, not just to find Kayla, but to bring her back to the people who needed her most. In this journey, we saw how loss, grief, and trauma could shape lives in ways we never expect. We saw a mother, a community, and even a dog who chose to protect, to fight, and to believe in hope even when everything seemed lost. The lesson here is clear. No matter how dark the path may seem, there is always light to be found. True strength lies not in giving up, but in continuing to fight for what is right, even when the odds are against us. It's easy to judge from a distance, but we all carry burdens that are invisible to others. Let this story remind us to show compassion to those who struggle, and to never give up on what matters most: love, loyalty, and the pursuit of justice. Thank you for following this story. What do you think? How did this journey resonate with you? Please feel free to comment below and share your thoughts or any personal experiences you've had with the power of loyalty, love, and redemption. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Heart Force for more tales of hope and resilience. Grace Anderson had always thought she understood pain, but nothing prepared her for the unbearable weight of losing Emily, her daughter, the one bright light in her world. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, just like any other. Emily had begged to visit the new animal shelter downtown. Grace had promised they would go that weekend, but fate had its own plans. In the blink of an eye, Emily's life was stolen, not by sickness or age, but by an unexpected tragedy: a reckless driver, an innocent child chasing a stray dog, and a world that would never be the same again. The hospital corridors were too quiet when Grace arrived, clutching Emily's backpack, paw prints painted on the fabric as if the universe were mocking her shattered heart. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Anderson," the doctor had said. His voice was hollow, words too empty to fill the space left by her child. The days that followed blurred. Funeral preparations, divorce papers, grief. It all consumed her. The streets of Millbrook whispered her name with pity, neighbors gossiping in hushed tones about the woman who once had it all and now wandered aimlessly in the park. But for Grace, the pain didn't fade. It settled in, like a dark cloud she couldn't escape. It was on one of those long, lonely walks that Grace first witnessed something that would forever alter her course: an extraordinary bond between a police officer and his canine. There they were, moving in sync, the handler's every movement mirrored by the dog. It wasn't just training, it was understanding. Trust. Something deep in Grace stirred. For the first time since Emily's death, she felt a flicker of hope. She could do this. She could make a difference. And perhaps, in the process, she would heal. She applied to the police academy the next day. Grace poured herself into the rigorous training, her grief slowly transforming into a fierce determination to help others, to never again let a child's life slip through her fingers. But deep down, she knew her journey wasn't just about protecting others. It was about redemption. For herself. For Emily. But the real test was still ahead. Welcome to Heart Force, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Grace's first days at the police academy were more grueling than she ever imagined. Every inch of her was pushed beyond its limits. Her physical endurance faltered, but her determination never wavered. The memories of Emily's laugh, the way she would beg Grace to rescue every stray dog they met, pushed her forward. Grace was no longer the woman who had once been lost in the quiet sorrow of her home. She was becoming someone else, stronger, sharper, and driven by a new purpose. Yet, despite the intense focus on her training, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She needed a partner. The kind of partner she had witnessed on that first day in the field. The kind that could be more than just a working dog, but a companion who understood without words. The K9 unit was a place where she could truly prove herself. She wasn't just another recruit. She was someone who knew loss all too well. And that, she believed, made her different. Better. She could understand what it meant to lose everything and yet still have the will to fight back. The day she met Chance changed everything. It wasn't the way Grace had imagined it would happen. Though, she'd expected to meet a dog, a polished, well-trained German Shepherd or Belgian Malinois. Instead, she found Chance, a dog broken in every sense of the word. Abandoned on the streets with matted fur and haunting eyes. His body was frail, and his spirit seemed to have been crushed by a brutal past. Chance wasn't a dog who fit the traditional mold. His scars, both physical and emotional, told the story of a life he hadn't chosen. He had once been trained by Marcus Wells, a canine trainer whose methods were as harsh as they were effective. But Chance hadn't been perfect. His natural compassion had been deemed a weakness, and so he was discarded. Left to die, Grace couldn't ignore the spark in his eyes. She saw something in him that others didn't, something Emily would have seen. He wasn't just a dog. He was a story of redemption. Grace couldn't let him go. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, crouching down beside him as she wrapped her jacket around his trembling body. "I'm going to help you, Chance. Together, we're going to prove them wrong." The decision to bring Chance into her life wasn't an easy one. It wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about giving both of them a second chance. A chance to heal. A chance to find the strength to face a world that had once abandoned them. As Grace stood up, her eyes locked with Chance's. There was no turning back now. The days after bringing Chance home were a whirlwind of adjustments. Grace could see that Chance was more than just a stray. He was a dog with a purpose, and she was determined to help him find it. It wasn't just about training. It was about rebuilding trust. Grace could relate to that feeling all too well. After losing Emily, she had built walls around her heart, walls that Chance, in his own quiet way, seemed to understand. But not everyone shared Grace's faith in Chance. Chief Michael Thompson, a veteran of the police force, was skeptical. Grace had applied to join the K9 unit with every ounce of her being, but now, with a dog who was considered a failure, her dream was starting to feel more like a long shot. "You want to take this?" "Stop." Thompson's voice was low and rough, his eyes scanning the paperwork in front of him. "Grace, you're talking about a dog that was abandoned. A dog who wasn't good enough for Marcus Wells Academy. You know the risk you're taking, don't you?" But Grace wasn't going to back down. She had seen something in Chance that no one else had. Chance is not a failure. He's different. His past doesn't define his future. His past will define this department's reputation, Thompson replied coldly. "This is a professional unit, Anderson, not some charity program for failed dogs." But Grace wasn't deterred. She remembered what Sarah had said when she first entered training. Sometimes, the best healers were the ones who had suffered the most. She believed that, and Chance needed someone to believe in him just as much as she needed him to believe in her. Over the next few weeks, Grace threw herself into Chance's training with all the determination she had. It was challenging, especially when the dog's past resurfaced in moments of fear or hesitation. Sometimes, when she would raise her voice to correct him, Chance would cower, reminded of the brutal training he had endured under Wells. It broke Grace's heart, but she refused to let him retreat into himself. "Chance, we're a team," she would tell him, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help you, just like you're here to help me." Each day, Chance's confidence grew, but so did Grace's. She had started this journey to heal, but what she didn't expect was for Chance to heal her in return. As their bond deepened, so did her resolve to prove that the strength in their partnership wasn't just in their training. It was in their shared story of overcoming. When the call came in about the missing child in Millbrook State Park, Grace knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. It wasn't just another test. It was their first real chance to show what they were capable of together. The radio crackled with the frantic voice of a dispatcher. "We have a 7-year-old boy, Ben Wilson, missing for over 4 hours. He's somewhere in the park, and the temperature's dropping fast. We need all available units." Grace didn't need to hear more. "Chance, we're going in," she said, her voice steady. As they arrived at the park, Grace's heart raced with fear and hope. Ben's parents were there, their faces pale and drawn with terror. Lieutenant Hayes, ever the skeptic, stood by the command post, his expression darkening as he saw Grace and Chance approach. "I'm telling you, Anderson, we need real K-9 support," he muttered under his breath. But Grace only nodded. "Chance is ready." She didn't wait for permission. With Chance by her side, they ventured into the wilderness, the temperature plummeting with every passing minute. Grace knew they were running out of time. Chance's nose worked furiously, his body tensing as he picked up the faintest scent of Ben's backpack. Grace's heart soared as she realized they had found the trail. This wasn't just training anymore, it was real. It was life or death. Every step was agonizing. The trees seemed to close in, the forest becoming more treacherous with each passing minute. But Chance didn't falter. His instincts, once considered weaknesses by those who had abandoned him, now led them forward. 2 hours passed, then 3. But Grace never gave up, and neither did Chance. Finally, the dog stopped suddenly, his body rigid, ears up, his tail held high. He whined softly, then surged forward. Grace followed without question, her heart pounding. Through the trees, they spotted a small figure, Ben, huddled under a fallen log, shivering and scared. "Ben," Grace called softly, her voice full of relief and hope. "We've got you." Ben's eyes opened, wide with fear. But when he saw Chance, the fear melted away. The dog pressed gently against him, offering warmth and comfort. "You're safe now," Grace reassured him, wrapping him in a blanket. But it was Chance who had made the difference. The boy clung to him as though his life depended on it. When they arrived at the command post, Ben's parents broke down in tears, hugging Grace and Chance. "Thank you," they sobbed. "You saved our boy." Lieutenant Hayes stood in silence, watching as Chance remained calm amidst the chaos. For the first time, his eyes softened with respect. "Good work, Anderson," he said quietly, a tone of admiration in his voice. This wasn't just a rescue. It was proof. Proof that Grace had made the right choice. Proof that Chance was everything he had always needed to be. More than a dog. More than a partner. He was a hero. The rescue of Ben Wilson brought Grace and Chance a surge of respect that neither had ever expected. News outlets began to take notice of the unusual K-9 team. And while some applauded Grace's unconventional methods, others were quick to question the decision to bring in a rescue dog. The criticism didn't faze Grace, not anymore. But the scrutiny, especially from Lieutenant Hayes, began to grow. He had been quiet since Ben's rescue, but Grace could sense his doubts. His skepticism hadn't been erased so easily. Despite the success, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was still ahead. Chance was finally being recognized for his abilities, but the battle for acceptance was far from over. And now, with a looming K-9 certification event, the stakes were higher than ever. Chance had proven himself in real-life situations, but this was different. This was a formal test, a public declaration of his worth. He would have to perform under the watchful eyes of every officer, every expert, every critic who had ever doubted him. Grace didn't hesitate to trust him. Not for a second. The competition was brutal. Dogs from all over the country were there, each one handpicked for their impeccable training. Grace had watched them all, noting their precision and obedience. But she had learned something vital from Chance. It wasn't just about performing a series of tasks. It was about judgment, the ability to assess a situation, to think. The first event was a scent detection trial, a grueling test of a dog's ability to track specific scents among a sea of distractions. It was a test most dogs could handle. But Chance? He moved with purpose, his body language deliberate as he worked through the scent trails. Where others rushed, Chance took his time, methodically working his way through the field, ensuring that he followed only the right scent. He didn't just follow orders. He analyzed the situation, using his intelligence to guide him. Grace watched with bated breath as Chance made his way through the course. The other dogs sped through, eager to finish. But Chance? He was in control, focused, patient, and unyielding. He knew what mattered. When the results were called, Chance's name rang out as the winner of the scent detection trial. The crowd was stunned. A rescue dog had just beaten the best-trained dogs in the country at their own game. But the real challenge was yet to come. The next event was a protection scenario, the most demanding of them all. It involved multiple suspects, some acting aggressively, others passively surrendering. Dogs had to be able to discern the threat from the innocent, using their training to protect without escalating the situation. Grace's heart pounded in her chest as she and Chance entered the arena. Her eyes never left him as he moved into position, waiting for the next command. This was it, the moment that would either make or break them. The first suspect emerged, brandishing a weapon. He moved quickly, aggressively, and Chance responded immediately, positioning himself between Grace and the suspect, his body low and ready. But just as quickly, another suspect stepped forward, a woman, visibly terrified. She raised her hands, signaling that she wasn't a threat. Where others might have reacted aggressively to the sudden appearance of a second suspect, Chance did something extraordinary. He hesitated. For just a moment, he studied the woman, reading her body language. He understood her fear, and instead of charging forward, Chance stepped back, waiting for Grace's signal. "Stay," Grace whispered, her voice steady. Chance obeyed, his eyes locked on the suspect with the weapon, his posture poised but non-aggressive. He had read the situation, and he had chosen the right course of action. The judges were stunned by his restraint. No other dog had shown that kind of control, that ability to assess the situation before reacting. It was a skill that went beyond training. It was instinct. Grace was trembling with pride as she guided Chance through the final portion of the test. It wasn't just a performance. It was a demonstration of everything she had believed about him. The things that made him different, the things that made him extraordinary. As the event drew to a close, Grace knew one thing for certain. They had proven themselves. It didn't matter what the critics said anymore. Chance had shown the world what he was made of, and more importantly, he had shown Grace that she wasn't wrong to believe in him. Later that evening, as Grace sat in the quiet of the training room with Chance, she reflected on everything they had accomplished. The hard work, the doubts, the setbacks. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that they had done it together. They had faced the impossible and turned it into a victory. Chance had shown the world that being different was not a weakness. It was a strength. "Well done, boy," Grace whispered, rubbing his ears. "We did it." Chance rested his head in her lap, his eyes peaceful and content. He didn't need the applause. He didn't need the validation. He only needed Grace. And Grace, for the first time in a long while, realized that she had found exactly what she had been searching for. The sun had barely risen over Millbrook when the phone call came in. A massive fire had broken out in the industrial district. An explosion had trapped 3 workers inside a dangerously unstable building. The fire still raged, and the risk of further explosions was high. Grace and Chance were called in as a last resort. The building was too unstable for human rescue teams. But Chance's ability to navigate wreckage made him their best hope. "Grace, I need you to understand the risk." Chief Thompson's voice crackled over the radio. "We're sending you in because we don't have a choice, but we don't have much time. You got 15 minutes. Grace nodded to herself as she geared up. "We can do it," she whispered to Chance. His dark eyes met hers, full of trust. In that moment, she knew this was more than just a mission. It was the ultimate test of everything they had fought for. The industrial building loomed ahead, its skeletal frame creaking under the weight of the fire's heat. Smoke poured from every crack, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and plastic. Grace's heart pounded as she led Chance toward the ruins, her flashlight cutting through the haze. They had only minutes. "Find them," she commanded. Chance moved with calm determination, his powerful frame navigating the wreckage with precision. The smell of burning wood and gas was overpowering, but Chance's nose worked tirelessly, his instincts guiding him through the labyrinth of debris. They moved through a maze of collapsed beams and twisted metal, Chance's every step deliberate, his eyes scanning for danger. When they found the first worker trapped beneath a fallen beam, Grace knew they were running out of time. The structure groaned ominously above them, threatening to collapse at any moment. But Chance didn't hesitate. He pressed forward, his body brushing against Grace as if to remind her that he was there, that he wasn't going to let her fail. They found the second worker soon after, unconscious but alive. Grace's radio crackled again. "We gotta move faster. Structural integrity is failing." The pressure was mounting, but Grace stayed focused. She glanced at Chance, his tail steady behind him, his movements as smooth as ever. He wasn't rattled. He was doing exactly what he was born to do. Then disaster struck. The building's foundation gave way with a violent groan. A massive beam crashed down, sending debris tumbling toward them. Grace and Chance had only seconds to react. In one fluid motion, Chance lunged forward, pushing Grace and the second worker out of harm's way. The beam crashed down where they had just stood, missing them by inches. Chance was trapped beneath the rubble, the beam pinning him down with unimaginable force. Grace screamed in desperation as she tried to free him, but the weight of the metal was too much. She couldn't do it alone. But then, just as quickly as it had fallen, the fire began to rage again, consuming the wreckage around them. Grace knew she had to make a decision: leave Chance and save herself, or stay with him and risk it all. "Stay with me, boy," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not leaving you." With all her strength, Grace tried to lift the beam, but it was impossible. She cried out for help, her voice hoarse with panic. Just then, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Help was on the way. But it would take time. Every second felt like an eternity. Chance's eyes locked with hers, calm, unbroken. It was as if he knew what she was thinking. His tail wagged weakly. Despite the pain, he was still there, still holding on. It was a miracle that they were rescued at all. When the rescue team finally arrived, Grace had to be pulled away from the debris, her hands bloodied from the struggle to free Chance. They found him alive, barely breathing, but alive. The next few hours were a blur of frantic medical care, emergency surgeries, and waiting. At the hospital, Dr. Morrison's grim face told Grace everything she needed to know. "The injuries are severe, Grace," she said softly. "There's damage to his spine. He might never walk again." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. How could this happen? After everything they had been through, after everything Chance had done? But as she sat by his side, his eyes still filled with trust, she made a vow. "Don't give up, Chance," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "You've given me everything. I'm going to fight for you now, just like you fought for me." Days passed. It was touch and go. The doctors worked tirelessly to save him, but it was a slow process. Grace didn't leave his side. She stayed in the hospital room, speaking to him, rubbing his fur, doing everything she could to comfort him. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that if there was one thing Chance had taught her, it was that nothing was impossible if you were willing to fight for it. And fight they did. Weeks later, When Chance finally opened his eyes, Grace was there. His tail wagged weakly, and his body trembled from the effort, but he was alive. Grace held his head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "We're not done yet," she whispered. "We're going to make it through this together. I promise you." Sometimes, the greatest battles are the ones we fight alongside the ones who refuse to give up on us. Grace's journey with Chance proves that healing isn't just about physical recovery. It's about never giving up, no matter how impossible the odds. Chance showed Grace that love, trust, and determination can turn even the most painful experiences into victories. Together, they demonstrated that second chances are not just for the broken. They're for those brave enough to believe in them. What lessons have you learned from your own experiences of overcoming challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Heart Force for more stories about the strength and resilience of dogs. The moon hung high over the forest, casting eerie shadows across the frost-covered ground. The air was biting cold. Each breath Liam Bennett took turning to mist in the night. His 13-year-old heart pounded in his chest, the sound deafening in his ears as he ran. Behind him, the angry voices of the men chasing him grew louder. "He went this way. Don't let him get away." His sneakers slipped on the icy leaves as he ducked beneath branches, his fingers clutching a small, worn leather journal. The yellowed pages of this precious book had been passed down through generations, and Liam knew that what was written in it could be the key to saving everything he loved. The voices behind him grew closer, their flashlights sweeping through the darkness. Panic gripped him, but then he heard it, a low whimper. Liam froze. His heart, already racing, skipped a beat. Ahead of him, in a small clearing bathed in moonlight, a magnificent German shepherd lay. Its paw was trapped in an unforgiving steel trap. The dog's gaze locked with Liam's, and despite its pain, there was no fear, only a piercing, almost human intelligence that seemed to pierce through the dark. Liam's breath caught in his throat. "I won't leave you," he whispered, carefully approaching. The dog watched him with unwavering focus, no hint of aggression, despite the cruel trap clamped around its paw. Liam knelt beside it, fingers trembling as he worked on the rusted mechanism, feeling every second ticking by like an eternity. The voices were almost upon him now. "Check over there. The tracks lead this way." The harsh voice of one of the men rang through the air. With a final, strained groan, the trap sprang open, releasing the dog's paw. Instead of running away, the German shepherd slowly rose to its feet. It didn't run. It stood in front of Liam, a low growl vibrating through its chest. The beam of a flashlight cut through the clearing, illuminating both of them. "There he is. Look at this mutt." The voice was mocking, filled with disdain as three men stepped out from the shadows, dressed in dark suits, their faces grim with determination. The German shepherd's growl deepened. Its powerful body stiffened, ready to protect Liam from whatever threat approached. Liam stood still, his hand resting on the dog's fur, a sense of calm washing over him. In that moment, he realized something profound. His life would never be the same again. The forest that had been his refuge, the dog that had become his protector, had connected him to something bigger, something ancient. Welcome to the Heart Force channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you're listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Liam couldn't tear his eyes away from the German shepherd standing before him, its posture protective and strong. The men were getting closer, their flashlights blinding, their voices full of intent. The dog's growl echoed in the silence of the forest, warning them to keep their distance. Liam knew, without a doubt, that if he moved, the dog would protect him with everything it had. But Liam also knew that he couldn't run. Not yet. Not without the journal. He glanced down at the leather-bound book. still clutched tightly in his hands, and then back at the dog. The connection was instant. The dog didn't just see him, it seemed to understand him. It was as if they had shared 1,000 silent conversations before this moment, 1,000 lessons learned in the woods where Liam had spent so many hours alone. "Good boy," Liam whispered softly, his voice barely audible over the thumping of his heartbeat. He could feel the cold sweat on his skin, but he wasn't afraid. He wasn't even sure why. He'd always felt alone, abandoned even. The adoption, the whispers at school, his parents, kind, loving, and firm in their dedication to the forest, had been a sanctuary for him, but still, he'd often felt disconnected from the world. The forest had been his refuge, and now, standing here with this dog, Liam felt more whole than he ever had before. The growl of the dog deepened, and Liam's fingers tightened around the journal. He had to do something. There was no turning back now. "Stay behind me," Liam whispered to the dog, though he wasn't sure if the dog understood or if he was simply speaking to calm himself. But the dog, surprisingly, obeyed. It moved to stand behind Liam, the growl now replaced by a quiet but powerful presence. The men were almost there, their voices now so loud that Liam could almost feel the heat of their anger radiating through the air. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the clearing. Liam stepped forward, straightening up, feeling a sense of power he had never experienced before. He wasn't just a boy lost in the woods. He wasn't just an adopted kid with a past full of whispers. He was something more. He was a protector, just like this dog. And together, they had a mission. "Leave us alone," Liam called out, his voice steady despite the panic flooding his veins. One of the men, a tall figure in a black suit, snorted. "You think you can stop us, kid? Get out of the way. This doesn't concern you." Liam stood his ground, feeling the dog's presence behind him. "I said, leave us alone," he repeated, his voice stronger now. "You're destroying everything this forest stands for. You're hurting more than just trees. You're destroying something that can't be replaced. You'll see. You won't be able to take it." The man raised a hand as if to strike Liam, but the German shepherd stepped forward, blocking the path. Its eyes, cold and filled with wisdom, never left the man's face. There was a silent challenge in those eyes, a promise of consequences if they took another step. The man hesitated. There was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. "This forest is just land. It's worth nothing. You're just a kid trying to play hero. Stay out of our way." Liam didn't back down. Instead, he took a step closer to the dog. "You're wrong. This forest isn't just land. It's home, and you're not welcome here. You won't destroy it." The man glared at Liam for a moment longer before signaling for his companions. "Let's go. We've got better things to do than argue with a kid and his dog." Liam stood motionless until the sound of their footsteps faded into the distance. Then he collapsed to his knees, the journal slipping from his hand to the cold ground. The adrenaline that had kept him upright now abandoned him, and the weight of everything, of the danger, the threats, and the knowledge of what was at stake, crashed down on him. The dog, Max, nudged his shoulder gently with its nose, offering silent comfort. Liam reached out, running his fingers through the dog's thick fur. "Thanks, Max," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I think you just saved my life." Max stood up, shaking off the tension that had filled the air moments before. He didn't need words. There was a deep connection between the two of them now, unspoken, yet undeniable. The dog's loyalty, unwavering and fierce, had bonded them together in a way Liam had never experienced before. He wasn't alone anymore. As Liam stood up, brushing off the leaves and dirt from his jeans, he took one final glance at the place where the men had stood. There was no time to waste. He had the journal, and he had a mission. The forest needed him. His parents needed him. And Max would be right by his side every step of the way. The days that followed felt like a blur for Liam. He spent every waking moment in the forest with Max, retracing his steps to the hidden clearing where they had encountered the men. The journal, now safely tucked away in his backpack, felt heavier than it ever had before. Every page seemed to carry the weight of generations of protectors, each one contributing to the legacy of the forest, each one risking everything to defend it. But now it was Liam's turn. Max trotted beside him, its paws steady and strong as they navigated the well-worn trails that Liam had memorized over the years. The dog's presence, so calm and protective, gave Liam a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. The forest whispered around them, silent, ancient, but alive with the memories of every guardian who had walked these paths before them. Liam knew that it wasn't just about protecting trees anymore. It was about the heart of Willow Creek itself, about family, about belonging, and about standing up for what was right, even when it felt like the whole world was against him. He had never been more certain of his mission. Liam and Max had spent hours combing the woods, looking for signs of the development company's activities. Each morning, they followed new trails, found fresh markings on trees, and documented every instance of illegal activity they discovered. Max's uncanny ability to sense when something was wrong had become an invaluable asset, guiding Liam away from the survey teams and toward hidden places where they could gather evidence without being detected. One late afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the tree line, Max's behavior changed. The dog had become more alert than usual, ears perked, eyes scanning the area with an intensity that made Liam pause. "What is it, boy?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Max's ears twitched in response. Then the dog turned, leading Liam toward a part of the forest that he had never explored before. It was a dense thicket of trees, the underbrush thick with brambles. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and a strange silence seemed to hang over the area, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Liam followed Max into the thicket, his steps careful as he navigated the tangled roots and low-hanging branches. He had no idea where the dog was leading him, but he trusted Max completely. They had shared something powerful since that night in the clearing, a bond that transcended words. And now, as they moved deeper into the forest, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold. The path eventually opened into a small, hidden clearing, one that Liam had never seen before. In the center of the clearing was a small cave, its entrance concealed by a dense curtain of vines. Max trotted ahead, nudging the vines aside with his nose, then stopped and looked back at Liam. "This is it, isn't it?" Liam murmured, his heart racing. Max's eyes met his, steady and knowing, and Liam realized that this was no accident. This was the place he had been led to all along. The cave was dark, its interior hidden from the fading light of the day. Liam hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, Max following closely behind. As he fumbled for his flashlight, Liam felt a strange sense of anticipation growing within him. The air inside the cave smelled of earth and old memories. It felt like a sacred place, a hidden sanctuary that had been waiting for him. And then, in the dim light of his flashlight, Liam saw it. Scattered across the ground were old papers, leather-bound journals, faded maps, and photographs that had been carefully preserved. He knelt down, his hands trembling as he picked up one of the journals. The pages were fragile, yellowed with age, but the handwriting was still legible. The first entry took his breath away. To those who find this journal, Willow Creek Forest is more than trees and earth. It is a sanctuary for those who need healing, a protector for those who need guidance, and a home for those who feel lost. But now, it faces its greatest threat. It needs a new protector. Liam's heart skipped a beat. The journal was old, dating back to the early 1900s. But the message was clear. The forest had always been protected by someone like him, someone who cared enough to fight for it. The name at the bottom of the page caught his eye. James Crawford, Guardian of Willow Creek, 1923. Liam's fingers trembled as he read on, absorbing the words of a man who had dedicated his life to the forest. Crawford spoke of a special bond between the forest and its protectors, a bond that was passed down through generations. He wrote about a line of German shepherds who had stood by the forest's side, protecting it from those who sought to destroy it. Max, the dog at Liam's side, was part of that legacy. The realization hit him like a wave. Max wasn't just a dog. He was part of the forest's legacy. He was one of the guardians, just like Liam. Max stood quietly beside him, his warm presence a steady reminder of the responsibility Liam now carried. Liam closed the journal, feeling the weight of the forest's history pressing down on him. But he also felt something else, a deep sense of connection. The forest had been his refuge, and now it was his calling. "Thank you," he whispered to Max, his voice thick with emotion. Max gave a soft, almost inaudible growl, as if to say, "You're not alone. We're in this together." Liam stood, feeling a surge of determination flood through him. He knew now that he wasn't just protecting the forest for himself or his family. He was protecting it for everyone who had ever sought refuge here, for everyone who had ever found solace in its shadows. And the fight, as he would soon discover, was just beginning. As the weeks passed, Liam's life became a whirlwind of urgency. The forest, the sanctuary he had always known, was under siege from the development company, Sterling Development. What had once been a place of peace, where Liam could disappear into the woods and lose himself in the rhythm of the trees and streams, was now a battleground. The men in suits, the heavy machinery, the stakes, all of it felt overwhelming. But Liam wasn't alone anymore. Max had become more than just a companion. He was his ally, his protector, and the constant reminder that this fight was bigger than either of them. Liam's days were spent in the forest, documenting every violation, every sign of destruction. Each time he ventured out with Max, the dog's instincts guided them through the forest's changing landscape, helping them avoid the surveyors and documenting the damage from the encroaching development. Together, they were building a case, one that could expose the company's illegal activities and save Willow Creek. But the more they uncovered, the more dangerous it became. One afternoon, as Liam and Max hiked deeper into the forest, a faint noise reached their ears. It was a low rumble like thunder, but it wasn't coming from the sky. Liam froze, his senses heightened. Max's head snapped up, his ears flicking in every direction. Liam crouched low, pressing himself against the side of a large oak tree. His heart was pounding. "Stay still," he whispered to Max. The dog crouched beside him, perfectly still. Liam strained his ears, tried to locate the source of the noise. It was unmistakable now, the sound of heavy machinery, the grinding of gears, the sharp whistle of metal on metal. The bulldozers, they were closer than ever. Liam's pulse quickened. He'd known this day was coming, the day when the developers would push forward no matter what, but hearing it in the distance made it real. The bulldozers were coming for the forest, coming for everything he had worked so hard to protect. Max whined softly, his eyes locked on Liam, as if asking for a plan. Liam's hand tightened around the journal in his backpack. The words of James Crawford echoed in his mind. The forest needs a new protector. Liam swallowed hard, a surge of resolve washing over him. This wasn't just about saving trees anymore. It was about protecting the heart of Willow Creek, the place that had saved him when nothing else could. It was about standing up for everything he believed in, even if it meant facing down the biggest challenge of his life. "Let's go," he muttered. Max nodded, his body tense with energy. Together, they slipped through the underbrush, moving with the silent grace that had become second nature. They stayed low, avoiding the bright beams of the surveyor's flashlights that occasionally swept through the trees. Liam's mind raced with plans, each one more daring than the last. He couldn't let them take the forest. He couldn't let them win. Soon, they reached the ridge, the place where the bulldozers were scheduled to begin clearing. From the edge, Liam could see the machines idling in the distance, waiting for their orders to start tearing into the land. But something caught his eye. In the distance, just past the machinery, Liam saw a small group of men huddled around a table. The flash of papers, the sharp gestures, they were discussing something important, something that could help them. Liam knew this was the break he'd been waiting for. Max's growl rumbled low in his throat, as if he could sense the danger ahead. Liam patted the dog's head, his voice steady but urgent. "Stay close, Max. We're going to gather the proof we need." With Max leading the way, Liam crept closer, his breath shallow. The men were too focused on their plans to notice the two of them, hidden in the undergrowth. Liam pulled out his camera, his hands steady despite the racing of his heart. Click, click. He took the shots, capturing the documents, the men's faces, the illegal activities unfolding before him. This was it, the evidence he needed to expose Sterling Development for good. But as he was about to move back, a sound pierced the air, a voice sharp and angry. "Who's there?" Liam's heart lurched in his chest. It wasn't the voice of one of the men. It was the voice of someone who had found them. "Run," Liam hissed, grabbing Max's collar and pulling him toward the safety of the trees. They moved quickly, moving deeper into the woods, away from the danger. But the sound of boots crashing through the underbrush behind them was unmistakable. "They've seen us," Liam muttered, panic rising in his chest. His breath came in quick gasps as he ran. But Max was already ahead, darting through the trees with ease, guiding Liam on a path that only the dog seemed to know. Max led him to a small hollow beneath a fallen tree, the perfect place to hide. Liam pressed his back against the cool earth, holding his breath as the men passed by, searching the area for any sign of their presence. Time seemed to stretch on forever. The only sound was the pounding of Liam's heart. But Max remained calm, his eyes scanning the area, alert for any danger. When the men finally gave up and moved away, Liam allowed himself to exhale. His hand was shaking as he pulled the camera from his bag, checking the pictures one last time. The proof was clear. Sterling Development was breaking the law, and Liam had the evidence to prove it. But as he looked down at Max, a new realization struck him. This fight wasn't just about evidence. It wasn't just about the forest. This was about family, about what it meant to belong, and about the strength that came from the relationships we built. Max wasn't just his protector. Max was his family now. "Thank you, Max," Liam whispered, his voice full of emotion. Max's tail wagged in response, his head resting gently on Liam's knee. They were no longer just fighting for the forest. They were fighting for the people they loved, for the home they had built together. The days that followed were heavy with anticipation. The evidence Liam and Max had gathered, the photos, the maps, the testimonies could change everything. But it wasn't just about the fight for Willow Creek anymore. It was about the truth, about standing firm when everything seemed stacked against them. The people in the town, the ones who had once supported the Bennetts, were turning away. The whispers had started again, louder this time, whispers about Liam's past, about his birth mother, about his place in this world. Liam sat in the corner of his room, the walls closing in around him as he stared at the evidence on the desk before him. The photos were clear, proof of illegal logging, pollution, and the arson that had ravaged the forest. But the cost of revealing it was high. It meant exposing everything he had fought to protect: his family, his home, his relationship with Max. It meant facing the world that had rejected him, the town that had once been his sanctuary, but now seemed like a battleground. Max lay by his side, his head resting on Liam's knee, a silent comfort in the midst of the turmoil. The dog had been his strength through it all, guiding him through the darkness, showing him that sometimes the greatest battles were not fought with fists, but with courage and truth. Liam closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had to make it now. He had to choose whether to continue fighting in the shadows or to stand up, expose the truth, and risk losing everything. But as he looked down at Max, he knew there was only one choice. He would stand for what was right. The next morning, the town hall meeting was filled with tension. Liam could feel the weight of every gaze on him as he stood at the back of the room, Max by his side. The voices of the developers were louder than ever, painting a picture of prosperity, of progress. They spoke of luxury resorts, of new jobs, of a bright future for the town. But their words were hollow to Liam, his hands shaking but his resolve firm. Max stood by his side, a quiet but powerful presence, his steady eyes scanning the crowd. "Before you make your decision," Liam said, his voice shaking but clear, "I need you to see something." He reached into his bag and pulled out the evidence, the photos, the documents, the journal. As he laid them out before the crowd, a murmur ran through the room. The developers tried to shout him down, but Liam didn't back down. He continued, showing them the illegal activities, the destruction, the lives being ruined in the name of progress. Sterling Development is lying to you, he said, his voice growing stronger. They're destroying the heart of Willow Creek. And they don't care about what happens to the people who live here. They don't care about the forest. But I do. The room was silent as Liam spoke, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He felt Max's presence beside him, steady and unwavering. And in that moment, he knew that he wasn't alone. He had the truth on his side. Liam, a voice called from the back. It was Mike Davidson's father, the construction manager who had once supported the development project. You're just a kid. You don't know what you're doing. This project will bring jobs, prosperity to this town. Liam turned to face him, his heart steady despite the storm raging inside. I know exactly what I'm doing, he said, his voice unwavering. I'm standing for what's right. This forest, this town, they're worth more than any dollar amount. They're worth everything. The developers tried to argue, to twist the truth, but it was too late. The truth had already been laid out before the community, and the tide was beginning to turn. As Liam left the meeting, Max walked beside him, a quiet victory in their steps. The fight wasn't over, but they had made their stand. They had shown the town what was at stake. And for the first time, Liam felt like he belonged, not just in the forest, but in the world around him. He had found his purpose, his calling. The following days were filled with chaos. The town was divided. Some saw the truth of Liam's words, while others clung to the promises of the developers. But through it all, Liam stood strong. With Max by his side, he continued to gather evidence, to fight for the forest that had been his refuge, and to protect the people who had supported him. And then it came, the breakthrough. The town voted to stop Sterling Development's plans. The developers, unable to ignore the overwhelming evidence, were forced to back down. The forest was saved. The victory was sweet, but the real victory had come long before, when Liam had chosen to stand up for what was right, when he had chosen to fight for the forest, for his family, and for himself. As Liam sat in the clearing with Max, the sun setting behind them, he understood something profound. It wasn't just about protecting the forest. It was about protecting the things that truly mattered: loyalty, truth, family. Max, ever the silent protector, sat beside him, his presence more powerful than any words could express. They were a team, a family bound not by blood, but by something far stronger: unconditional love and the courage to stand for what was right. Liam's journey teaches us the power of standing up for what we believe in, even when the odds are stacked against us. It's about finding the courage to speak the truth, protect those we love, and take action in the face of adversity. Sometimes the hardest battles are not fought with strength, but with integrity and the willingness to fight for what's right. What do you think of Liam's journey and the challenges he faced in this story? How can you apply his determination to your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the Heart Force channel for more inspiring stories about dogs and their incredible bond with us.